The battlefield's remnant. The air smelled of smoke and death. The battlefield stretched for miles, covered in the bodies of the fallen. Some were human, their armor broken, weapons shattered. Others were Korthan, tall, strong aliens with dark, scaled skin and glowing eyes. They had been fierce warriors, but now they lay silent, just like the humans they had fought. Captain Elias Carter stepped over the wreckage carefully. His boots crunched against the dry, burned earth. The war had raged for months, leaving nothing but ruins behind. His unit had moved ahead, but he stayed behind, searching for survivors. He didn't know why. Maybe he just wasn't ready to leave this place yet. A weak sound made him stop. It was a breath, shallow, struggling. Someone was still alive. Elias turned, scanning the area. At first, he saw nothing but bodies and broken machines. Then, near a fallen metal beam, he spotted movement. A Korthan. His body tensed. Korthans were deadly, even when injured. They never surrendered. They fought to the last breath. Slowly, he raised his rifle, aiming at the figure. It was a Korthan warrior, a woman. She lay on her side, one arm across her stomach, her body covered in dust and blood. Her armor was cracked, and her breathing was uneven. Her dark skin, once smooth and strong, looked dry and weak. She was starving. Elias hesitated. She should be dead like the others. Why was she still alive? The woman stirred. Her eyes flickered open, glowing yellow in the dim light. They locked onto Elias, filled with pain, but also defiance. Even now, in her weakest moment, she was not afraid. Elias tightened his grip on his rifle. He should end this now. One shot. That was all it would take. But he didn't pull the trigger. Instead, he crouched beside her. His fingers found a small metal pouch attached to his belt. He opened it, revealing a ration pack. It wasn't much, just dry protein and a few sips of water. But it was enough to keep someone alive. The Korthan woman's eyes narrowed as he placed the food in front of her. "What is this?" she asked, her voice weak but sharp. Elias didn't answer right away. He wasn't even sure what to say. "Food," he finally muttered. She didn't move. Her gaze flicked from the food to him, then back again. Korthans were taught that humans were cruel, that they took no prisoners. They never showed mercy. "Why?" she whispered. Elias sighed. He didn't have a good answer. Maybe because she was helpless. Maybe because he was tired of all the killing. Maybe because, in this moment, she wasn't an enemy, just a dying soldier like so many others. "Because you are still alive," he said. The woman studied him for a long time. Then, slowly, her fingers moved toward the ration pack. She picked it up with trembling hands. Her fingers were long, tipped with short claws, but she was too weak to be a threat. She struggled to open the pack. Elias reached out, but she flinched. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. She hesitated, then let him take the pack. He tore it open and handed it back. She took a small bite, chewing slowly. Her body shuddered as she swallowed. The food was bland, but for someone starving, it was life itself. Minutes passed in silence. Elias glanced around. They couldn't stay here long. If enemy patrols were still nearby, they would both be in danger. "What's your name?" he asked. The Korthan woman paused. For a moment, it seemed like she wouldn't answer. Then, in a hoarse whisper, she said, "Vela." Elias nodded. "I'm Elias." She looked at him again, as if trying to understand him. Humans and Korthans had fought for so long. There was no trust between them. Yet here they were. Suddenly, a distant sound made them both freeze. A low hum. A patrol drone. Elias cursed under his breath. The drone was searching the battlefield for survivors. Anyone left alive would be executed on sight. Vela tensed, trying to move, but her body was too weak. Elias had a choice. He could leave her here. No one would blame him. She was the enemy, after all. But he had already made his choice. Without a word, he grabbed her arm and pulled her close, shielding her body with his. His heart pounded as the drone's red light scanned the area. If it detected them, they were dead. Vela stiffened in his grasp. She was confused, maybe even afraid. Then the drone passed over them. For a moment, it seemed to pause. Then it moved on, fading into the distance. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Vela looked up at him, her glowing eyes unreadable. "You protected me," she murmured. Elias stood, offering her his hand. "Come on. We need to get out of here." She hesitated. Then, for the first time, a Korthan warrior took the hand of a human soldier. And together, they disappeared into the ruins. A fragile truce. The ruins stretched in every direction, a graveyard of metal and bone. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows over the wreckage. Elias moved carefully, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his senses alert. Every step was a risk, but turning back wasn't an option. Behind him, Vela followed, her movements slow and unsteady. She was weak, barely able to walk, but her pride kept her from showing it. They didn't speak as they climbed over the wreckage. The silence between them was thick, heavy with distrust. Elias could feel her eyes on him, watching, measuring. He didn't blame her. Korthans and humans had fought for so long that neither side knew how to see the other as anything but an enemy. Yet here they were, moving together through the wasteland like uneasy allies. Vela stumbled. Instinctively, Elias reached out, grabbing her arm before she fell. She flinched, baring her teeth in a quiet snarl. For a moment, he thought she might strike him. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, releasing her. She glared at him, but her legs trembled. Her body was failing her, no matter how hard she tried to hide it. She needed rest, but there was no safe place here. Elias scanned the area. There was an old supply bunker nearby, half buried under rubble. It wasn't much, but it was better than staying exposed. He nodded toward it. "Come on, we'll rest there." Vela hesitated. Trust didn't come easily to her kind, but she was in no position to argue. With slow, careful steps, she followed him into the bunker. The inside was dark and cold, but it provided shelter. Broken crates were scattered across the floor, their contents looted long ago. Elias lowered himself onto a rusted metal beam, stretching out his tired legs. Vela sat across from him, her back against the wall. She still kept her distance, her body tense, ready to react. For a long time, they sat in silence. Then, finally, she spoke. "Why did you help me?" Her voice was quiet, almost cautious. Elias sighed. He had asked himself the same question. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because you were dying. Maybe because I'm tired of this war." Vela studied him. Humans kill Korthans without hesitation. No mercy. No kindness. Elias met her gaze. Korthans do the same. She didn't argue. Instead, she looked down at her hands. They were calloused, scared from years of battle. Her people valued strength above all else. Weakness meant death. Kindness had no place in war. She reached for the ration pack he had given her earlier, taking small, careful bites. She ate like someone who didn't trust food to always be there. Elias watched her, wondering what kind of life she had lived before this war. "You fight because you have to," he said, "not because you want to." Vela's golden eyes flickered. She didn't answer right away. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I was born into it." Elias frowned. "No choice." She shook her head. "Korthans fight. That is our purpose. Strength is everything." Her fingers curled around the empty ration pack. "But even the strong can be abandoned." There was something in her voice, bitterness, pain. Elias realized then that she wasn't just an enemy soldier. She was someone who had been left behind, discarded by the very people she had fought for. "Your own kind left you," he said. It wasn't a question. Vela's jaw tightened. She didn't want to admit it, but the silence was enough of an answer. Elias exhaled, leaning back against the wall. He had spent his whole life fighting, just like her. But at least he had a choice. At least he had people who would come for him if he fell behind. They weren't so different after all. A distant noise made them both freeze. A low, mechanical hum. Patrol drones, searching the battlefield. Vela's body tensed, her breathing shallow. If they were found together, there would be no mercy for either of them. Elias reached for his rifle. "We can't stay here." Vela forced herself to her feet, though she swayed slightly. He caught her arm again, but this time, she didn't pull away. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. They were no longer just enemies. They were survivors. And for now, that was enough. Hunted together. The ruins stretched endlessly, a silent testament to war's cruelty. Twisted metal, shattered armor, and broken weapons littered the ground like relics of a forgotten time. Elias moved cautiously, his boots pressing against the cracked earth, his rifle gripped tight. Behind him, Vela followed, her steps unsteady but determined. She was still weak, her body fighting exhaustion, but her warrior's spirit refused to break. Above them, the sky darkened as the sun dipped behind the ruined skyline. The air was heavy, charged with an eerie stillness. But Elias knew better than to trust the silence. He had been a soldier long enough to recognize the feeling of being watched. Then the sound came. A low, mechanical hum, distant but growing louder. Drones. Elias tensed, his grip tightening on his weapon. He glanced at Vela. She had heard it too. Her body stiffened, her golden eyes sharp despite her fatigue. She knew what it meant. If the drones found them, there would be no warning, no mercy, just a quick, merciless end. "We need cover," Elias whispered. Vela's gaze darted around the wreckage. There were no trees, no proper buildings left standing. Only crumbling debris and the skeletons of war machines. Not enough to hide them if the drones had scanning tech. Then she spotted it, an old trench, half collapsed, but deep enough to provide shelter. Without a word, she grabbed Elias's sleeve and pulled him toward it. He didn't resist. They slid down into the trench just as the first drone crested the horizon. The cold dirt pressed against their backs as they crouched low, barely breathing. The drone hovered above the battlefield, its searchlight scanning the ruins. Elias could feel Vela's body tense beside him. She wasn't used to hiding. Corthans faced death head-on. To cower in the dirt like prey went against everything she had been taught. But she stayed still. She trusted him. The drone's light passed over their hiding spot, lingering for a moment. Elias's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He kept his hand close to his rifle, ready to fire if needed, though he knew it would be suicide. If they were spotted, there would be no escape. The moment stretched, each second an eternity. Then, just as quickly as it had come, the drone moved on. Elias let out a slow, controlled breath. His muscles ached from the tension. Beside him, Vela exhaled, her fingers gripping the dirt. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, finally, she turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You are used to hiding," she said quietly. Elias gave a small, tired smile. "I'm used to surviving." Vela studied him, as if seeing him differently for the first time. Her people never hid, never ran. But humans fought with their minds as much as their weapons. It was something she had never respected before. Now she wasn't so sure. Slowly, Elias stood, offering her his hand. This time, she didn't hesitate. Her clawed fingers grasped his, and he pulled her up. They moved quickly, staying close to the ruined ground. If there were drones, there would be patrols. They needed to find a real shelter, somewhere safer than an open trench. After a few minutes, they spotted it. A collapsed bunker, partially buried under rubble. It was small, barely more than a hole in the ground, but it would have to do. Elias climbed inside first, testing the structure. It held. He motioned for Vela to follow. And she did, though not without hesitation. The space was cramped, forcing them close together, but it was shelter. Vela sat against the wall, her breathing heavy. Elias pulled out another ration pack, tossing it to her. She caught it, eyeing him suspiciously. "You keep feeding me," she said. He shrugged. "You keep not dying. Seems fair." She scoffed but opened the pack, eating slowly. The silence between them wasn't as tense as before. It was strange. This understanding. They had been enemies hours ago. Now they hid together, hunted together. Elias leaned his head back against the bunker wall. "You said your people abandoned you," he said after a moment. "Why?" Vela stopped chewing. For a long time, she didn't answer. Then, finally, she spoke. "I lost a battle," she admitted. Her voice was quieter than before, as if the words themselves carried shame. "My squad fell. I was the only one left. To be the last survivor is a failure." Elias frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "To Corthans, it does." She set the empty ration wrapper aside. "Only the strong return home. The weak are left behind. A warrior who survives alone is no warrior at all." Elias studied her. He had fought Corthans for years. He had seen their brutality, their refusal to surrender. But he had never thought about what happened to the ones who didn't win. "So they left you," he said, "to die." Vela nodded. "It is the way of things." Elias shook his head. "That's not survival. That's cruelty." She didn't respond. Maybe because she knew he was right. Maybe because, for the first time, she didn't know how to defend her people's ways. The night deepened, the cold creeping in. They had a long way to go before they were safe. But for now, in this small broken bunker, they were just two soldiers caught between war and survival. For now, that was enough. The betrayal. The night was deep and restless, the kind where shadows stretched long, and silence pressed too heavy against the ears. The bunker smelled of rust and earth, a reminder of how long it had been abandoned. Elias sat with his back against the cold metal wall, his rifle resting across his knees. Across from him, Vela sat just as still, but her eyes never closed. She watched the entrance, her fingers flexing now and then, like a predator ready to strike. Neither of them slept. Trust was still a fragile thing. The wind outside shifted, carrying with it an unnatural sound. A hum, faint at first, but growing louder. Elias tensed. It wasn't a drone this time. This was something else. Footsteps. Too many. Vela stiffened, her sharp hearing picking up the same thing he did. She locked eyes with Elias, and for once, there was no hostility, only the shared knowledge that they were in danger. Elias moved first, rising from his position, his boots pressing softly into the dirt floor. He peeked through the small gap in the bunker's collapsed wall. Outside, figures moved through the darkness, their shapes shifting in and out of the ruins. They weren't Corthans. The way they walked, the way they held their weapons, Elias knew exactly what they were. Humans. Scavengers. They were worse than enemy soldiers. Corthans fought for honor. Scavengers fought for whatever they could take. Supplies, weapons, blood. Vela caught his expression and understood immediately. "Yours," she whispered, her voice low but edged with warning. Elias shook his head. "They're no one's." Scavengers didn't fight for an army. They roamed the wasteland, hunting for anything valuable. Sometimes that meant food. Sometimes that meant people. Vela's grip tightened around the small blade she had taken from a fallen soldier earlier. She wasn't strong enough for a full fight, but she was still dangerous. Elias held up 2 fingers. "Two in front," he whispered, then nodded toward the left side of the bunker. "More over there." Vela's jaw tightened. "They will not leave us alive." "No," Elias admitted. A voice called out in the night. "Come on out. We know you're in there." Elias didn't move. Vela's breath was slow, measured. Neither of them made a sound. The voice laughed. "Listen, we don't have to do this the hard way. You step out, drop your weapons, and maybe, just maybe, we let you live." Elias could hear the amusement in the man's tone. He had no intention of letting them live. Vela met Elias's gaze. "We fight?" she asked. Elias nodded once. The first scavenger stepped closer, his rifle raised. His mistake. Elias moved fast, bursting from cover. His rifle cracked, and the scavenger dropped before he could react. The others cursed and fired, bullets ripping through the air. But Elias had already ducked back into the bunker. Vela struck next. She wasn't at full strength, but she was still faster than they expected. She lunged out, slashing her blade across the throat of the second scavenger before twisting his own weapon from his grip. He fell, gurgling. Shouts erupted. More of them were coming. "Move," Elias ordered. Vela didn't hesitate. They sprinted through the ruins, weaving between wreckage as bullets sparked against metal. The scavengers chased them, but they were disorganized, their greed outweighing their skill. Elias ducked behind a fallen transport vehicle, breathing hard. Vela crouched beside him, her body trembling from exertion. She was still too weak, but she refused to slow down. "They will not stop," she muttered. "I know," Elias said. They needed a way out, a way to turn the fight in their favor. Then he saw it, an old fuel cell, cracked and leaking. If he could get a shot at it. "Cover me," Elias said. Vela didn't question him. She took the scavenged weapon and leaned out, firing at the approaching figures. Her shots weren't perfect, but they were enough to make the scavengers hesitate. Elias aimed carefully. 1 breath. 2. He pulled the trigger. The bullet hit the fuel cell, and the explosion ripped through the night, engulfing the scavengers in fire and debris. The shockwave knocked both Elias and Vela to the ground. When the dust settled, silence returned. The scavengers were gone, burned, buried, or too broken to fight. Vela groaned, pushing herself up. Elias sat up beside her, wiping the dust from his face. He turned to her, expecting some sharp remark, some Corthan insult. Instead, she looked at him with something close to respect. "You fight like my kind," she admitted, with fire. Elias chuckled, shaking his head. "I fight to survive." Vela exhaled, nodding slowly. "Then we are the same." For the first time, she said it like it wasn't a bad thing. They stood together, side by side, as the embers of battle smoldered around them. The war hadn't ended, and trust between them was still fragile. But in this moment, they were no longer enemies. They were something else. And for now, that was enough. The turning point. The night smelled of fire and death, the air thick with the aftershock of battle. Smoke curled from the wreckage where the scavengers had met their end, their bodies lost beneath the twisted metal and burning debris. Elias adjusted his grip on his rifle, his hand steady despite the exhaustion settling into his bones. He had been fighting for too long. Beside him, Vela leaned against a jagged metal slab, her breathing uneven. The battle had taken its toll on her. She wasn't fully healed, and the frantic escape had pushed her body past its limits. But she didn't complain. She simply clenched her jaw, forced her trembling hands to steady, and stood straight. Elias watched her for a moment. He had seen Corthans fight before, brutal, unrelenting, their strength overwhelming. But he had never seen one like her. She fought not just for survival, but for something else, something she couldn't quite name. "We need to move," Elias said, breaking the silence. Vela nodded, pushing herself forward, though her legs wavered slightly. Without thinking, Elias reached out to steady her, gripping her arm. For a moment, she tensed, her body reacting on instinct, but then she let out a slow breath and didn't pull away. "Still alive?" he asked. Her golden eyes flickered with something unreadable. For now, they left the battlefield behind, weaving through the ruins as the night deepened around them. The wind howled through the broken structures, carrying whispers of the past, echoes of battles fought, of lives lost. The ground beneath them was unsteady, shifting under their weight as they climbed through the wreckage. After a while, they found shelter in an old outpost, its walls cracked but still standing. Inside, the air was stale, untouched for weeks, maybe months. Elias scouted the area, checking for threats, but there was nothing left here but dust and silence. He sat near a rusted control panel, setting his rifle beside him. Vela lowered herself onto the floor across from him, her movements slow, controlled. Elias tossed her another ration pack. She caught it without looking, tearing it open with quiet precision. She ate methodically, each bite slow, thoughtful. It was strange, watching a Korthan eat like that. He had always imagined them as ruthless warriors, not weary survivors rationing every bite. After a moment, she spoke. "You risked yourself." Again. Elias glanced at her. "You were dying." Again. A flicker of something crossed her face. Amusement? Maybe. "You could have left me," she said. "I could have," he admitted. "But I didn't." She studied him, her golden eyes reflecting the dim light. "Why?" Elias exhaled, running a hand over his face. He was tired. Of the war, of the killing, of the endless cycle of enemies and allies. But he didn't know how to explain that to her, how to tell her that for once, he didn't want to be just another soldier following orders. "Because you're still here," he said finally. "And that means something." Vela didn't answer right away. She looked down at the ration pack in her hands, turning it over, lost in thought. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than before. "My people do not believe in kindness," she said. "To show mercy is to show weakness." Elias leaned back against the wall. "That's a hell of a way to live." Vela's jaw tightened. "It is not living. It is surviving." A silence stretched between them, not awkward, but heavy. A shared understanding that neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Then, without warning, Vela shifted, pulling something from her belt, a small curved blade. Elias tensed, his instincts flaring, but she didn't raise it against him. Instead, she placed it on the ground between them. It was a Korthan warrior's dagger. Elias frowned. "What's this?" "A gift," she said simply. He blinked. "From you." She nodded. "A blade is given only to one who has earned trust." Elias hesitated. Korthans didn't just give weapons away. This wasn't a simple act. It was a statement, a sign that, whatever came next, she no longer saw him as an enemy. Carefully, he picked up the dagger, feeling its weight in his palm. It was lighter than he expected, the edge sharp despite its age. "I don't think I've ever had a Korthan trust me before," he said. Vela smirked, though there was no malice in it. "Do not disappoint me, human." Elias chuckled, shaking his head. No pressure, then. For the first time, the war felt distant, like a story told long ago. They were still soldiers, still on opposing sides of a battle that had defined their lives. But in this moment, they weren't just enemies forced to survive together. They were something else. And for now, that was enough. The final stand. The morning came slow, filtering through the cracks in the outpost's ceiling, casting long beams of light across the dust-covered floor. Elias sat near the entrance, his rifle resting beside him, his fingers tracing the edge of the Korthan dagger Vela had given him the night before. The weight of it felt different now. Not just metal and edge, but something more, something heavy with meaning. Vela stood nearby, stretching her limbs, testing her strength. She was stronger now. The exhaustion still clung to her, but the fire in her golden eyes burned brighter. She was healing, and with it, something between them had changed. The distance they had once kept was gone. They were no longer just surviving side by side. They were standing together. And then the world shattered. A deep, resonating hum cut through the morning air, a sound Elias had hoped never to hear again. It was low and guttural, vibrating through the ground beneath them. Vela froze, her posture rigid, her breath caught. She knew that sound too. A Korthan warship. Elias bolted to his feet, his instincts screaming. They had found her. Vela turned toward him, her face unreadable, but Elias could see it. Fear, hesitation, and something worse. Acceptance. She knew what this meant. A voice, deep and commanding, echoed from the sky above. It spoke in the Korthan tongue, but Elias understood the message clearly. Vela of the fallen, surrender yourself. Your dishonor may yet be redeemed. Elias's stomach twisted. They weren't here for a fight. They were here for her. Vela's expression darkened, her hands curling into fists. She took a slow, measured breath, her body still, like a predator deciding whether to run or to strike. They will not leave without me, she murmured. Elias swallowed hard. You're not going with them. She turned to him, her eyes searching his face. You do not understand. Then explain it to me, he snapped, his frustration cutting through the fear in his chest. Explain why you'd rather go back to the people who left you to die. Vela's jaw clenched. If I fight, I am a traitor. Elias scoffed. And if you go with them, what? They welcome you back with open arms. Her silence was answer enough. Outside, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the ruins. The Korthans weren't waiting. They were coming for her. Elias stepped in front of her, his heart pounding. Vela, listen to me. She hesitated. I fought Korthans before, he said, his voice low but steady. They don't ask twice. Vela's gaze flickered, a war waging within her. Then, finally, she sighed. It was not surrender, it was a choice. She reached for the blade at her hip, drawing it with quiet precision. Elias nodded. Then we fight. The first Korthan soldier stepped into view. Tall, armored, his blade drawn. His glowing eyes locked onto Vela, his expression void of emotion. You bring shame upon your people, he said in their native tongue. Do not make this worse. Vela didn't flinch. It is already worse. Then she moved. Fast. The fight erupted in an instant. Vela struck first, her blade slicing through the air, meeting the Korthan's weapon in a shower of sparks. Elias raised his rifle and fired, cutting down another soldier before they could react. The Korthans hesitated, surprised, perhaps, that a human and one of their own stood together. But it didn't last. The battle was brutal, swift. Metal clashed against metal, the ground littered with the fallen. Vela fought like a storm, her body moving with deadly precision, striking down her former kin without hesitation. Elias fought differently. He was a soldier, trained to shoot, to take cover, to strike with precision. But this wasn't war. This was survival. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The last Korthan fell, his weapon clattering to the ground. Vela stood over him, breathing hard, her blade slick with blood. Silence. Then the sound of the warship overhead. Elias looked up, his chest heaving. They're not done. Vela wiped the blood from her blade. No, she agreed. But we are. Elias frowned. What do you? Before he could finish, Vela turned, grabbed his wrist, and pulled him into a sprint. They ran, weaving through the wreckage, moving fast despite their wounds. Behind them, the warship roared, its engines flaring, but it did not fire. They had won, but it wasn't victory. It was escape. As they climbed over the last stretch of ruins, Elias slowed, glancing back at the battlefield they had left behind. The bodies. The warship, now retreating into the sky. He turned to Vela, who stood watching, her golden eyes unreadable. You made your choice, he said. She nodded. And so did you. There was no celebration, no relief, only the quiet realization that neither of them could ever go back. They weren't enemies anymore. They weren't soldiers. They were something else. And whatever came next, they would face it together. Escape and new beginnings. The sky stretched wide and empty above them, streaked with the soft hues of dawn. The Korthan warship was gone, leaving nothing behind but silence. Smoke still lingered in the ruins, curling between twisted metal and broken bodies, but the battle was over. Elias exhaled, letting the tension in his shoulders ease, if only slightly. His body ached, his muscles burning from the fight. He wiped the blood from his brow. Not his own this time. Vela stood a few paces ahead, her back turned to him. The wind caught strands of her dark hair, lifting them in the morning light. She was staring at the horizon, lost in thought. She had fought against her own kind, defied everything she had ever known. And now, she had nothing. He stepped beside her, watching the sky. "They'll come back," he said quietly. Vela nodded. "They will not forget." Silence stretched between them. It wasn't heavy like before. It was something else now, something uncertain. Elias glanced at her. "So, what now?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her belt and pulled out the small Korthan communicator she had taken from one of the fallen soldiers. She turned it over in her palm, her expression unreadable. Then, without hesitation, she crushed it. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's one way to burn a bridge." Vela smirked, just barely. "I have no bridge left to burn." She tossed the broken device into the dust, watching as the wind carried away the shattered pieces. Elias studied her. Something was different. The fire in her eyes hadn't dimmed, it had changed. Before, it had been the fire of a soldier, a warrior raised in a world of endless battles. Now it was something else, a spark of freedom, maybe, or something close to it. "I know a place," he said. "An old outpost, deep in neutral territory. They don't ask questions." Vela turned to him. "A place to hide. A place to start over," he corrected. She tilted her head slightly, considering. "And what will you do there, Elias Carter?" He shrugged. "Figure it out, I guess." He met her gaze, his voice softer now. "Maybe you could too." She studied him, as if weighing something unseen. Finally, she let out a quiet breath. "I was taught that purpose is given, that we do not choose it." She looked down at her hands, calloused, scared, hands that had only ever held weapons. "Perhaps that is a lie." Elias nodded. "I think it is." She looked at him again. There was something new in her gaze. Not trust, not yet, but something close. They had no home, no armies, no war to fight. But they had survived. And for now, that was enough. As they walked toward the horizon, the ruins behind them fading into the distance, a faint peeping sound interrupted the silence. Elias stopped, frowning. He reached into his pack, pulling out his communicator. It flickered to life, a weak signal crackling through the static. A voice, distorted but urgent, broke through. "Elias, if you are alive, you need to get out. Now." Elias stiffened. He knew that voice. Commander Hale, his unit leader. Vela narrowed her eyes. "What is it?" Elias gritted his teeth. "My people." He looked at the screen, at the warning flashing across it. "They think I'm dead. But if they find out I helped a Korthan..." Vela's expression darkened. "They will hunt you." Elias sighed. "Looks like you're not the only one with a bridge to burn." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Vela did something unexpected. She reached down, took the Korthan dagger from Elias's belt, the one she had given him before, and pressed it back into his hand. "You are no longer just human," she said. "You are something else now." Elias closed his fingers around the hilt, feeling the weight of it, the weight of everything that had changed. "Then I guess we run," he said. Vela smirked. "Then let us run fast." And together, under the rising sun, they disappeared into the unknown. Not as enemies, not as soldiers, but as something new.